It's like I remember when I was flying, I'd be put onto flights like into those third world countries that people wouldn't even pay to travel to. And you'd go there, literally the lights would go out because someone generates the electricity manually. Can you imagine that now? No, it's very hard to imagine because you haven't been through that. And then the next flight that I'll go to would be somewhere super rich, somewhere in maybe like Sweden or Denmark. And you see the way of the standard of living in those countries, and it makes you think that why on earth that these people live on the same planet, but they're living in such different lives. Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina, and I'm a good friend of Sanjay. We go way back since uni days, aka poor student days. And I'm currently a campaign and distribution lead / sales initiatives manager in Westpac, and I live in Sydney, Australia. Yeah, so my career path, I guess it remains within a financial services industry, specifically in banking, starting from New Zealand, and I moved to Australia in 2018. But I'd say if I have to summarize my approach, I've probably taken instead of a linear approach, I've taken a more of a diversification approach. Because when people think of banking, it's like, like you're in a bank, you like deposit and like give out money. But actually there's so many different areas that you can explore into depending on what like skill set you wanted. So I've always had a vision that I wanted to develop on a few different areas of skill set. So I've just explored, different parts of bank and started in distribution, which is frontline. So your branch banking, your contact centers, from frontline team member to a leadership position. And now I'm in more of a technical role where I develop like sales strategies for those distribution teams. So it's like a sales initiative / project manager. And in between, I've also left banking for a year because I wanted to, develop other skills out of the corporate world. So I went to Doha, Qatar, and lived there for a year to become a flight attendant for Qatar Airways for a year and a bit. And that was a really good experience. So it was just time to come back into the corporate world and continue with the banking industry, but at the same time exploring different technical skills that I wanted to develop into.
That's fascinating. And I think you briefly touched on it as well, as because we wanted to dive into your career decisions, and you mentioned about diversification. Did you have anything that you want to go through, and what are the other career decisions, career and decision drivers that allowed you or attracted you towards those decisions that you have made from where you started in New Zealand to where you are now in Australia?
Yeah. That's a good question, because I think for a lot of guys new into their career path, you don't necessarily know what you want. In fact, not many people know what you want. But the most important guiding principle in hindsight is just to be curious and have a mindset to explore. And don't think that the job that you're in now will be your job forever. Focus on the present. If you're in a job, focus on doing it really well, because that's what's within your control. If you look too far ahead, I think it creates a bit of anxiety, and also that's out of your control. So if you do those things well, so that's live in the present and be curious, opportunities will present itself and you won't go wrong. And eventually, the more you know with more experience, you get to know yourself better and you know what you like and what you don't like. And then you can diversify into areas that you want to get into. But in order to find out what you want to get into, that comes from curiosity. And you would only get that experience and get that exposure and the opportunity if you do well in what you do. So if I can give anyone advice, I'd say just follow those two guiding principles, live in the present and be curious, and you won't go wrong. So that's sort of my approach towards diversification. And when opportunities come along, another thing that I always keep in mind is, so I would say yes to everything, even if I know, if I'm in doubt that, would I be able to do this or not? But scrape that thought, I always say yes. If you screw up, then just apologize and do it again. because you have to grasp onto that opportunity to explore your potentials. You never know where your limit is unless you give it a go, and putting things in execution is the best way to explore yourself.
Because I was quite curious, a couple of things. So you've mentioned about living in the present and doing what's within your control. How do you then factor in the vision or the long-term goal and the short-term goal? Because it sounds like what you've mentioned, it puts a lot of emphasis on getting your short-term goal right, or getting the today, the 2 days, the 4 days, the 7 days right. Mm-hmm. How do you make sure that you are aligned to the long-term goals, so you're not sprinting towards the wrong direction?
I think long-term goal is dynamic. Some people might have a very clear vision of what they want, but for myself, even now you ask me what's my long-term goal, I'll find it very difficult to articulate to you what I actually want to do. So rather than thinking, okay, I need to clarify what my long-term goal is, which gives me a lot of anxiety at times, I think it's probably just better to break it down into short-term goals. Because to me, like, I've been reflecting on what anxiety is, and I think the opposite of anxiety is putting things in execution. Like, if you start to make little milestones, then organically your anxiety would be gone. And I feel like that mindset has really benefited me. So if I have to really think about my long-term vision, I think the strategy that I go by is a product mindset. So what I do is I think of myself as a product. It's like, you know, a phone, a computer, or a brand. So what value can I add to others? How can I be helpful to others? That's number one. And the second component for product mindset is, what branding do you want to project onto others around you? So those are the two guiding principles that I sort of go by to make sure I'm on the right track from a long-term perspective. While I don't know, I can't say to you in 5 years' time, I want to be XYZ. I want to, be a CEO in this corporate, because I don't know. But if I follow, when I get lost in like short-term thoughts, I bring back that product analogy. So what value can I add to others now? What skill set do I need to develop to add further value going forward? And the branding that I want to make myself to be known for to others around me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There was along the lines of moving away from hoping for a static or a clear long-term vision, then to move from understanding that the long-term vision will be dynamic, which is a living document. And that will be seen as a huge source of anxiety if you just see it as what the heck am I doing? But if you break that down into smaller pieces that's digestible and executable, then you are able to live that through and digest that anxious feeling or anticipation of things going out of control, because you're bringing it within your control. And then you're saying, if I was a product, what value would I bring to my customers or in our society that someone will pay for or would like to barter or trade our values for? And also thinking about, how can I add value? How can I be helpful? And what kind of branding do I want to be known for? So that's kind of what I got.
Yeah, precisely. And I think that mindset really came to me after the cabin crew experience, because within the traveling job, you get to see the world on a bigger scale, whereas I probably was only exposed to a little area of the universe of our Earth prior to flying. And it really gives you a cosmo mindset in terms of, what else is out there. There's so many possibilities out there. So it's very hard to define what you want to do within a certain amount of time. But in fact, I think it's important to also embrace the different possibility that lies ahead of you that you can only grasp onto if you do a good job in what you do now.
You seem to be quite satisfied with your answer just now. You're like,
no. Just speaking from the heart.
Speaking from the heart. That's awesome. The other one that I wanted to break down was, you're talking about the yes mindset of when there are opportunity, even if you fear or if you are anxious about it or if you don't believe in yourself, say yes. And if you get it wrong, if you fail, then apologize. So just bringing that back to the surface, how do you discern between multiple opportunities? Let's say now you have this let's say ABC. And if you are in the mindset of, I'm going to take risk and I'm going to be a yes, how do you discern between the three?
It's hard because I haven't been presented with that many opportunities at the same time.
But let's say
If I like,
hypothetically,
do I have 3 job offers?
or let's say, because the audience that I'm trying to pitch for is 18 to 25. So let's say you've studied really hard, diligently at during high school, and you applied for 3 different universities or 3 different courses, 3 different bachelors or 3 different apprenticeships, and you got offered in all 3 priorities. If it was you, and I'm sure you've made a lot of choices, whether it's at the level of careers or daily or weekly or monthly or strategic planning, how do you discern between the 3?
Yeah, I think fundamentally your question is asking on decision-making approach. Like if you're presented with multiple opportunities, then like how do you make that decision towards the right answer? I think I'm going to get a bit scientific here. I'm going to use the theory of dopamine. I think dopamine is a very well-known like neurobiological term and theory that's out there nowadays. Basically, dopamine is perceived pain versus reward. So the higher the perceived pain, the more the reward that follows. I would, like speaking now, like based on my knowledge, I would think of those 3 as which one would bring me the most amount of perceived pain. Perceived pain doesn't necessarily mean like physical pain, you know, like it's things that require effort. If I have to really put myself in that position, which one of these 3 opportunities do I think is the most challenging one and that I would need to put in a lot of effort to do a good job in? And I think that the listeners of your podcast would have a certain level of self-expectation. Otherwise, they won't be listening to a podcast. And I believe all the listeners would have, you know, with that self-expectation, you want to do well, you want to keep on pushing yourself. So choose the one with the most perceived pain and the most, which equals to challenge. And that way you are pushing yourself, you're improving yourself and you increase your capacity in a shorter amount of time. You get there faster, because if something is too easy, then it just means you're not pushing yourself. It's like the gym. If you don't get the muscle fever the next day, then you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And that might not be for everyone, but I'm just thinking, you know, if you're straight out of uni, you're at an age that where you have the most amount of energy and where you're in that self-exploration phase. The reality is you might not know what you're capable of, but by picking one based on your current, the realm of understanding that you know about yourself at that point of time, by picking the most challenging one, you'll improve the most within the same amount of time.
No, that's good, because I think that is something that I can take as my homework and look into that as well. You know, I think it's really important that you are in the right mindset, because what I'm hearing up till now is not just do this, but uphold this mindset, or take this mindset, or live with this mindset. So I think it's a great place to bring us to the second part of our career chat around growth mindset. For you, what is growth mindset?
I think we've covered quite a bit of the theories in the prior part, but growth mindset is just to not be static. Like if you view yourself in the guiding principles that I mentioned earlier, like those product mindset, then you won't really go wrong. As long as you're feeling as though you're putting in effort every day and you feel challenged, you want to make yourself in a position where you feel challenged. And you're always, it doesn't mean that you're not living in the present, but the growth mindset is you need to be looking for, or at least thinking about what's next. And you can't get too comfortable, because if you're getting too comfortable, the truth is you're probably feeling the anxiety. Like, you know it yourself. You don't need others to tell you if you're getting too comfortable. Like sometimes you know that you need to like grow in a certain way, but you're not putting things in execution. That's something that you know yourself. You don't need others to tell you. So you need to be really true, stay true to yourself, and make sure you know you're doing things that are enabling you to grow. So growth is the opposite of fixed mindset. So one is stagnant and one's static. So no, what's the one is static and one is dynamic. Yeah. And yeah, so like I don't think much needs to be covered. It's something that only you would know whether you're in a growth phase or not. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's
And
a hard
even
one, because whether you, I think it's a mindset that you can choose, and learn how to stay in it. I don't think some people are just born to have it and some people are born not to have it. I think it's a choice of that perceived suffering for a greater gain. And I think it's a sense of purpose as well. And sometimes you don't know where your sense of purpose is, but I do also think that I sometimes don't need a clear sense of purpose to do a good job. I have other good enough reasons to do a good job. Like I want to be a good role model for my brother. I want to be a good role model for other friends and families, and that in itself is a good enough purpose.
absolutely.
So I think it's sometimes important to remember that you are not just you are a network of influence, and your mindset will, whether intentional or unintentional, impact other people's mindset as well. And I always want to uphold a positive mindset and a growth mindset so I can positively influence and uplift people rather than being down buzz or, pulling people down.
That's a really good point. And I think that you've gone into the next layer. So growth mindset isn't just about yourself, but you shadow cast a long way, and your influence to others around you is something that can't be underestimated. So I think that's a really good point to bring up as well. And growth mindset, it's a broad concept. It doesn't have to be just in your career. There's also your personal life outside your job. There's so many other things that you can grow as well. Like even if you're in one job, you can go study into something that you haven't, that's not part of your job. Study science, go read, like look into something, because all of that combined would make you a different person, make you a better product.
So what are you studying or interested in these days?
Science. I've been reading a lot into science, and because I feel it started with a journey just to read more books. So I started with like fiction books, and then that's what really got me into reading. And then I started reading into nonfiction, like those self-development books, which is helpful. I think is particularly helpful for people in their early 20s. But what I feel is though that really recalibrated my brain, and because I was on a journey to try and be more objective and not subjective, try to not put too much emotions in my decision making, but more so considering the facts and also data around me, because that's, in a data driven world that we live in now, it's really important to be very objective to every decision that you make and everything that you say. So science books is really what recalibrated my brain and developed a different framework of thinking, particularly physics, because physics in itself is not, it may or may not be interesting to people, but what physics really teaches you, physics is really the answers to life, universe, and everything. It's the fundamentals of everything around us. It tells you to think with the first principles thinking. So at work, how does it benefit me? So if I'm presented with a problem statement, if I apply the first principles thinking, it just enables me to understand what the real problem is. Like fundamentally, what are we trying to solve here? Once you nut that out, everything else becomes very easy, and you go into a flow state of understanding what exactly you need to do, and you have a very clear mindset and framework to solving a problem. So that's what I mean. So even if you read into things that's perceived as totally irrelevant to your job, I think it all adds up in hindsight, and it'll play into your performance as a whole.
And I think the more I live out the work life, the more I figure out that the more you have, the more you diversify in your knowledge, the more stories you can tell, and the more stories you can cater to a specific audience that reaches deeper. And that's stakeholder management, right? And when you want to, and change management as well.
Absolutely. It's all science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Psychology and everything is in that logical way of thinking. So if you get that grounded and right, then it's really hard to not get things
Yeah,
right.
I
Really.
have to say, on the topic of mental health, I think science also helped me a lot in developing a better mental health, because you become very objective in the way that you view things. If people are upset with you, or people say things to you that previously would have upset me, now I'm able to, by default, approach it from a very like objective approach. And you would think, you'd apply, different scientific theories. Maybe it's dopamine, maybe it's a psychology theory, or and you kind of understand that everyone's got their own perspectives, but also the real problem. Be confident in yourself and don't get upset by others. And all of that was strengthened by reading into the different parts of scientific knowledge. So that's why I would really recommend. I know it's not for everyone to start now, but start thinking about it. Start reading little bite-sized science articles. It'll really help you in the long run.
So if someone is saying, "Oh, Sabrina, that sounds like something I should do, but I don't want to read like big, thick physics books, those I've never read at high school or even uni," if I'm in that position, what could be my first micro step towards absorbing those scientific or literature?
Perhaps first of all, if you're not into reading, I would really suggest that there are a few really good YouTube videos that you can watch into. I don't know. Should I give you recommendations? Or you can type it into your
Yeah, you can tell me at the
thing
end
later.
and I'll just
Yeah,
edit it.
I'll tell you at the wing. Yeah. I think I'd say challenge yourself to dedicate at least 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes a day, not too long. Find a scientific video or find something interesting to watch. And once you develop a base knowledge, you become more curious. You find yourself becoming more curious, because in every video, you find a question that you want to know the answer to, and it leads to the second video, the third video. And eventually, the videos won't satisfy you. You need to start reading books. And once you start reading books, that momentum continues. It's like now I started reading science, but now I'm reading into philosophy and like religion, because there are some questions that can't be answered by physics, and there's a lot of crossover between philosophy and physics. So that's where the connection comes. And try to challenge yourself by starting 10 to 15 minutes of video watching a day, and see how you go. It's not for everyone, but at least give it a go.
Yeah, I think no one no one that's watching my video will be challenged by watching 10, 15 minute videos.
That's what you're doing now.
Yeah, you're doing that right now. But I do think, I was looking at the funny thing, I'm just sidetracking for a few seconds. I was looking at data analytics of my YouTube videos, and a lot of people just join and leave because my average watch time is like less than 2 minutes, but my average YouTube video length is more than 10 minutes. So yeah, side thing, but I got to work on it. Those are really good tips, because it really intertwines really well with your whole approach of building a curious mindset and let your curiosity take you. And then also taking on risks along the way of walking through the journey of being curious, where there is the fundamental perception of high stress or high effort is also in the end, at the end of the tunnel is also high reward. And that's a dynamic way of growing in a micro credential way, but you're growing consistently and you're incrementally improving as you continue in that same mindset, because you're not stopping.
Yeah, and you mentioned risk. I think perceive risk as something exciting. It's very easy. It's natural human psychology to sit back when you see something as a perceived risk and you see it as a negative thing. But when you feel it's the same with change. When a change comes, a change brings a lot of opportunities, but the natural psychology of humans make us resist change. That's our subconscious. So when you feel change or risk, try to challenge yourself to perceive it as something exciting. And everyone's got different risk appetite. You might have a low or high risk appetite, but when you realize that you're starting to feel a bit negative about it, think to yourself that it's exciting and it brings more possibilities for me.
Yeah, I did hear somewhere around that racing heartbeat before doing, for example, something commonly perceived as stressful is public speaking. So if you have a raced heartbeat, rather than saying I'm nervous, started to change using your words, saying I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited. And over time, that helps you to support that raise in heart rate that comes naturally, is associated closer with excitement than the fear or the anxiety. So I think it goes in line with what your recommendation was around that building an excitement as part of taking risks.
Yeah, and that requires like experience and time as well. I think, Sanjay, the version of me that you knew back in uni is very different from the version that you of me now, right? Would you say so?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think before I used to be a very anxious individual, and I would get worried about every little thing, and I wanted everything to be lined up. Like the stars need to align before I do things, but that's not sustainable. But the moment when you embrace risk and challenge, that's when you really start to think broad about be excited about what's ahead of you, be excited about unknowns. And also, I don't know if your parents would agree to travel when you're young. Try to take maybe not a year if you don't have the luxury of one entire year of gap year, then at least do bits of travel. Try to do a little bit every year, every now and then, because it really opens up your perspective. It puts you back into your, in your position, and having gratitude of what you have now. It's like, I remember when I was flying, I'd be put onto flights like into those third world countries that people wouldn't even pay to travel to. And you'd go there, literally the lights would go out because someone generates the electricity manually. Can you imagine that now? No, it's very hard to imagine because you haven't been through that. And then the next flight that I'll go to would be somewhere super rich, somewhere in maybe like Sweden or Denmark. And you see the way of the standard of living in those countries, and it makes you think that why on earth that these people live on the same planet, but they're living in such different lives. So it really makes you feel gratitude, and gratitude contributes to your overall satisfaction in life and work.
And there's also a saying that you can't be grateful and be complaining at the same time, or something along those lines. Like it's something that primes your brain and keeps you in a state. And it's really important. And that famous analogy of the half full or the half empty cup, right?
Yeah.
If you keep choosing to see the cup half empty, you choose to see everything as half empty. And then there are those who are somehow always grateful. Those are the ones that keep seeing the half full cup.
Yeah, that's a really, really good summary as well, because everyone is capable of going both ways. When you're born, by nature, you can go one way or the other, but the beautiful thing about our brain is we have neuroplasticity. That means you're able to rewire your brain to think in a certain way. If you start now, today, don't complain, start embracing the present, start to embrace the risks and challenges, and just have a positive mindset, you're subconsciously rewiring your brain to become a better version of yourself. And I know to some people it might sound like something a little bit far-fetched or even a little bit like spiritual, but I think I've been through that myself to say that it works, and just trusting yourself and trusting the journey.
So we went on a long journey through the career decisions, diversifications, having a curious mindset, living in the present, the yes mindset, how to sort through the long game and the short game. So the product mindset, the dissecting the dynamic long term, and sometimes anxiety prone vision, and breaking it down into executable small chunks, and how to make decisions or discernment between the many yes opportunities, using a theory of dopamine, perceived pain versus reward. Then we went to growth mindset, recommendations around getting into scientific way of thinking. In particular, you're finding a lot of value in physics and its relationship and your benefit with your mental health. And first step of reading could be around watching YouTubes to build curiosity, and until the point where you can no longer suffice your curiosity and moving into small breaks or small moments of reading throughout the day to build that habit, and then transferring your risk appetite into a excitement appetite, and then the value of having gap year and building gratitude from seeing different parts of the world, and just widening your way of thinking, and absorbing what's out in the wide world, and then just ending it up with neuroplasticity. This is something that everyone can do, and you are a living proof of that neuroplasticity. But yeah, that's our career.